Hey, Lori, I think you're muted still.
There, how's that?
That's just right.
Good, good. I see Ben is with us and Sherry. So,
Hi again.
hey, are you closer to being ready for your business after hours?
No, we just went and got all the drink stuff and starting to get the tent set up and power washing the parking lot. So we're getting closer.
Okay. Yeah, sounds fun. I need to go through there next time I'm in Kearney. My car is looking a little dirty. So
Come on up. We got plenty of them.
I
So,
went with,
for
uh
future reference, my daughter owns a business that plans those for you, Ben.
That does what?
She owns a business that party plans.
Oh, there
yeah,
you go.
event
Nice.
She's an
planning.
event
Yeah,
coordinator. She owns something beautiful event. They primarily do weddings, but she likes to do other things too. She does a
Nice.
lot of stuff down at the boutique, one of the boutiques on the bricks downtown. She works for them part-time
Oh,
and
very
does a lot
cool.
of stuff for them too. So,
Nice. Yeah, that would come in very, very handy.
yeah.
Very
I was
cool.
gonna say my car is charcoal black gray, and people told me I would regret it. I don't regret it, but I do notice it gets a little dirtier looking more frequently. So,
I hate my red car.
Yeah,
I'll never buy a red car again.
yeah.
I
So,
didn't know much about wedding planning, and then we bought the Hotel Hardington a year and a half ago, and now we're full-blown wedding planners.
oh
Yeah,
my.
I could send your contact information. They travel. So
Nice, nice.
I primarily work out of the Tri-City area and a lot of Holdridge.
Okay.
But just because she and her employee are both from here, but now they both live in Kearney.
Okay.
And so, and her employee is actually retiring. It was the employee had the business, my daughter joined her, and now she sold the business to my daughter, and I think she's going to retire
Hmm.
probably next summer.
Oh,
So,
very cool. That's awesome.
Sherry, do you want to get our beginning slide
yep,
up? Because I see
I'm
some
working
people
on.
joining us. I think this opening slide came from a few months ago. We had a presenter on, and it was during March Madness, and we kind of got a spirited discussion about who your favorite sports team was. So I thought with fall sports, I would just ask the question who you were cheering for this year as you join. Feel free to open your microphone and tell us. I realize, let me just say, I know that Creighton does not have a football team, but there are other fall sports that we can cheer for. So Sarah is already on board saying the Huskers. So just chime in if you would. Tell us who are you cheering for this year? I tried to get all the secondary schools. Bertrand, yes, you can put a high school team on there um, if you would like. So tell us a little bit about who your favorite team is and maybe um, if it's a daughter, son, granddaughter, grandson, or just your favorite team. Ben's solid on the Huskers. I would say it got to be a pretty fun-loving but contentious discussion when we did this a few months ago. We had chasers, we had, um, it was just fun. So tell us who you're cheering for this year, if
I
you
have
would,
a
and I would
new
love
one.
to. Uh-huh.
So one of my teammates from college, her daughter is an assistant coach now on a volleyball on Tulsa University. So I'm going to follow Tulsa University volleyball this year.
Okay.
I don't know. She
I thought,
played for Houston for a couple years, and then she went and played sand volleyball in Florida, and now she's going to be an assistant coach. So yeah,
okay, good. I almost put Tarleton on for you, Sherry, but I ran out of time. So,
that's
so
funny.
it's amazing how the mascots somewhat look familiar and similar as they're being designed. But so yeah, Huskers, Josh is always a loper and folding in K-State
Yep.
because he has personal interest in K-State now with a daughter going to school there. So yeah, so tell us who you're cheering for this year. As
Well,
we begin.
my hometown is on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. So in my hometown, you're either OU, OSU, Texas, Texas A&M, or Texas Tech. It's a very
Okay.
diverse group of where you're going. And
Okay.
so it's kind of funny to watch drive down on football game day to see who all's flags are up. So
Fun.
I've always been a Husker fan, but this year I'm still a Husker fan. But Hastings College has a good friend who I coached when he was in high school and coached with when he was at Alliance, who just retired from Grand Island. Jeff Thomas on the coaching staff. So now I'm going to be a fan of that team too.
All right. Yeah, I don't have anybody at the high school or collegiate level just yet. So I'm going to be a Lincoln East Junior Spartan fan this year. So yeah, tell us who you're following this sports season. Is it soccer? Is it volleyball? Is it football?
look at Sarah's message, cheering
Oh,
on the HomeNE Learning Network. Yay, Sarah.
yay, Sarah. So, and Rick, University of Sioux Falls and Northern Iowa Community College has a nephew on each team. How fun.
Nice, fun.
So Jill is all about the Lopers. So it is fun to watch our teams, and it's going to be a good year for the Huskers, right?
Sure.
Gotta be every year.
Every year, the eternal optimists that we are, it's going to be a good year. So yeah, we're getting close to our 2 o'clock start time, but you still got a little bit of a few seconds to add who you're cheering on this year. High school, college, out of state, in state. I couldn't begin to put everything on here, but just tell us who you're cheering for. We've got a lot going on with Ben today, and I want to get started close to time. So we'll give it one more minute. Okay, Kennesaw State in Georgia. Okay,
Nice.
running cross country, Val, or what's she doing there?
She is doing cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. Last
Okay,
year as a freshman, she set the school record for the steeplechase. So I think she'll be a little excited about that. But she's always wanted to be a Husker. We'll see how long she stays in Georgia.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's root for her to return in short order, okay?
That'd be great.
So, well, let's go ahead and get started. I know we have people continuing to join us, but I do want to take advantage of every opportunity we have to hear from Ben Conover today. So welcome to the August 24 edition of HomeNE. We are excited for you to be joining us today. I'm Lori Ferguson from South Central Economic Development District. We serve as the lead agent for the HomeNE Learning Network, and it's a network that is designed for all people from across the state, dedicated to bringing local leaders and community individuals who are passionate about housing in their communities together. We foster face-to-face and online opportunities for people through the HomeNE Learning Network to engage and learn skills and ideas from each other so that they can successfully address their community's local housing challenges. Today, we are joined by Ben Conover of Conover Properties. If he sounds familiar, that's because he did join us about 2.5 years ago. We had to look that up, and we are just delighted to have Ben joining us today. Sherry, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So when he joined us in February of 2022, he had a lot of projects going on, and we thought it would be just really fun to have Ben join us again to update us on what he has completed in that time, as well as what he has undertaken. He is a busy person, and we are so glad that he said yes to joining us today. So welcome to you, Ben. Thanks for being here with us. Would you, before we begin, give us just a little bit of a synopsis of who you are, what you do, for those who might be newer to HomeNE? Tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our group, if you would, please.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Yeah, good to see everybody. I think some of you folks I know, and some are I haven't been introduced to. So good to meet everybody. And I can't believe it's been 2.5 years since we visited last time. It doesn't seem like that long. It goes faster, I think, as we get older. But yeah, Ben Conover. Me and my wife have been married almost 20 years, 20 years next year. Her name is Sarah. We got 3 kids that had their first day of school this morning, so I took them to their first day of school. We got 6, 9, and 12. What I do for work or my profession, I guess, can kind of be broken down into 3 fields. So I have a financial planning practice and a financial planning firm out of Norfolk, Heritage Financial Services. We own Tommy's Car Washes in Columbus, Norfolk, Grand Island, and Kearney. I'm actually in Kearney today, so we're doing business after hours, kind of a big chamber event there at the car wash. If anybody is close to Kearney, seems like Kearney is well represented. Stop out for some pizza and maybe an adult beverage. And we also take older buildings and have found ways to renovate them into apartments or give them life where maybe they didn't have a future. So yeah, excited to share a few of those with you today.
Sounds good, Ben. If you go ahead, just get us started if you would, please.
All right, share my screen here. So kind of what I thought I would do. So our web page, just so everybody has reference. I know last time I visited, it was really kind of neat. I probably had 5 or 6 folks from different communities that reached out with questions, or I had another gentleman and it was applying for the Nebraska Housing Trust Fund grant that had reached out for with questions after that visit too. So if you do want to reach out to me, our contact information is on this page, our email, our phone number. And then also, if after the call, if you want to look back at any of our renovations, we're trying to do a better job. We created this webpage, kind of updated it about 1.5 years ago. The first 3 projects we did, the first 3 were in Pierce, Nebraska, where it was an older building renovated into 3 nice apartments and storefronts, and then two buildings followed in Tilden, Nebraska. I didn't put a lot of time or effort into documenting anything. I just was kind of running and trying to figure it out, and I never really stopped to slow down and say, God, I should take pictures or actually remember what I did. So, those 3 projects, we never did a lot of that. And then when we started in Madison, which is where we'll kind of start today, we realized, hey, this is kind of a neat thing, and these buildings should really be documented, the history and the progression. So, and now on the web page, on the last 4 or 5 projects, you can go down and see finished pictures, and then we have kind of a slideshow of the progression of the build. So if you want to look back at any of those, you're more than welcome. So, but yeah, like I said, the first 3 projects we did were Pierce, Nebraska, and then 2 in Tilden. And, we kind of found a niche, and I had some contractors that were very good about, if I found the older buildings, which we kind of know all these buildings, right? It's the buildings with the storefronts on the bottom floor that usually are, either renovated or there's something down there, and the top floor is either vacant or dilapidated or really doesn't have any kind of a home, or maybe it's storage. So I know most of these cities, if I go, down the street, there's 5 or 6 or 7 of them kind of down the street. We would buy those buildings, and the top floor we would renovate into apartments. After our first 3, and I think I talked about this one 2.5 years ago, so this one might be a recap for you guys. The next one will be probably new, but the first large scale building we did was a bowling alley in Madison, Nebraska, that we used the Nebraska Housing Trust Fund grant for. And when we bought the building, it was, scary is kind of an understatement. It's more scary to me now, knowing what I know, versus back then when I was probably newer and, fresher. But it was essentially a bowling alley that had sat vacant for 10 years, where you had all the bowling lanes and the stuff and but essentially worked with the Nebraska Housing Trust Fund grant, did get the grant, had architectural and structural plans where we gutted the entire thing to scratch and built 12 beautiful apartments that are always 100% occupancy. But essentially, when I buy these buildings, the first thing we have to do is, number one, you got to get a plan. So we go through the building. If it's a larger building, we're working with an architect or a structural engineer, or people that know more than we do, where they can evaluate the building and, number one, what is possible. And most of these buildings, you can't tell half the structure because, like this building here, you had a whole bottom floor and then you had partial top floor, right? So half the stuff you don't really know until you take everything apart and see, what do we actually have? So you build kind of a partial plan on what you think you have, and then you start taking everything out of there, basically gutting it to nothing. That way the structural engineer can go back in there and see, how much he got right and how much he has to redo. So it's, you're kind of a builder, but you're kind of a problem solver, because you have a plan, but then you have to be malleable and change that plan, depending on what the building gives you as you find it. So the bottom of the building, and I know Sherry, I think you said this picture kind of looked familiar. This one sticks out in my head because it's probably the scariest. This was the bottom of the building and the structure. Essentially, you had a dirt floor with concrete, or with little wooden beams here on the bottom, and basically toothpicks. Half of them are in the air where they're just kind of dangling. They're not even affixed to the floor, and the building is sagging. And so all this we had to redo. But again, I'm happy that I had the foresight to kind of document the process. Again, this would be where we would have apartment 11 now. This was kind of the old bar before you would go into the bowling alley. But this is where we started. And I think every building I've ever done has had a fire at one point in time. I don't know if you guys have that in your community, where you go up there and you're like, oh, that used to be a fire, and this was a fire, and this was an old fire. So this building was one of those where the whole back end was charred. Most of these beams up here that hold the roof up were broken in half. And so, and the back wall here, you could see the daylight through the bricks. So again, number one is you have to gut it and get everything out of there. Number two is you got to shore up the building, and make sure it's stable when you build it. But the guys had to get up there 45 feet on a scaffolding and re-engineer the ceiling. And I'm not telling anybody you should do a building like this. This is probably the extreme. Again, I had a very willing contractor on this one, and was a little bit naive, but I guess it's kind of neat what's possible. This was the top floor that we had to demo from scratch. So we had to basically take the entire top floor off one piece at a time, while supporting the rest of the building so that it didn't fall over. This is the top floor that we demoed. And pictures like this kind of show you just the structural integrity of you kind of see how this is kind of cobbled together. Most of these buildings, when you take them apart, were, probably redone 5 or 6 times in the last 100 years, where people did different things to them, or, this was broken, so they fixed them. So a lot of that stuff you kind of uncover as you're dismantling it. And then this is where we want to get to. So this picture here is basically after we took the second floor off, we braced the ceiling, we had everything structurally sound where we could see exactly what we had and what we were going to build. This is where they're starting to lay out the bottom floor. And essentially build the bottom floor from scratch. And then just like a new house, you would have the second floor supporting structure to have the second floor. And I look at some of the materials in this, and now with the material costs, I almost should dismantle the building to sell the LVLs. They cost so much money. And then if you remember the picture from the bottom floor, the guys basically had to go through there from front to back, redo all the spread footings, and start at the bottom, leveling each beam out. Some of the beams were sagging as much as 8 inches. So jacking every beam up, it probably took 2 guys 10 days just to get those all level where they could put in the new support structure. And we build this stuff to keep them. So, the way we build it is, we're going to build it in a way that if I have it for 20 years, it'll hopefully be, the structural integrity of the building will be what it should be. This is what the top of that roof looked like after the guys had to re-engineer it. And again, it's basically a structural engineer going through there and telling you what you need to do, and then having the guys go through there and figure out how to implement that plan. So things that are kind of a surprise. So in this building, this was one of our biggest surprises. When they took the second floor off, they found this beam that it doesn't do it justice. It's more than 18 inches wide. Each section of a foot weighs like 80 pounds. I mean, it's an incredible beam, but somehow we had to remove this beam because it was going right through the middle of 2 apartments. And so, talk about re-engineering the ceiling and the trusses and the support structure so you can remove this massive beam. I think this is my contractor looking at the beam, wondering what the heck he's going to do with it. And then we've been blessed where, you know, and I take it for granted, but over the last 10 years, we've built a pretty good Rolodex of contractors that are welcome to, not scared to take this stuff on. So it's, you know, even the plumbing, the electrical, you know, everything you would think is normally easy on a new build where it's on a foundation and everything is straight, you know, to engineer the plumbing and the HVAC and all that stuff in an older building like this is kind of a different animal.
Ben, we do have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Were you using local contractors or someone from outside the area of Madison? How did you build that Rolodex, or who's in it, I guess?
Yeah, so my first 4 buildings, I had a contractor who was he was working for another gentleman, and when we did Pierce, he kind of did my stuff on the side. So we did it, you know, 20 hours a week for 6 months, and eventually we got done. And then when we bought the buildings in Tilden, I was able to convince him to, you know, he came and basically just did our stuff. And so we had essentially 2 guys that really only did our stuff, and then we would cycle through 4 or 5 other ones. So it's kind of your 2 main guys that could build anything, and then you had, you know, some guys with, you know, still good knowledge but lesser knowledge that maybe, you know, this guy would leave and we'd have to get another guy. A little bit different than when we did the theater building in Norfolk that we'll talk about, where, you know, Rod and I parted ways after Madison. 2.5 years together is a long time for one project, so he decided to do something else, and I ended up hiring a larger company, just because it was kind of out of necessity for where I was at the time. But I've had the best luck, where if I have 1 or 2 guys that really just do my stuff and they kind of essentially work for me, but they're independent, and then we can cycle a few other guys in and out. And with the knowledge I have now, I can kind of general it myself. That's been probably the best formula for us. And that's what I have now. We're doing a house and building out the rest of the theater building in Norfolk, and I have 2 guys that are pretty much dedicated to me, and then we have a couple others that come and go.
So generally local to the area that you're working in.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, most of I'm guessing most of you are working with folks that are budget conscious, and you have to watch the price on this stuff, and you know, it's always more time or more money. So if you spend a little bit more time and you find the local guys where you can build the relationships, you'll probably, you know, you'll probably build it quick, you know, cheaper. You know, if you need to build it really quickly, you'll probably need to hire, you know, like a Beckenhauer or a chief construction or somebody that's going to be, you know, you're adding another layer of cost.
Okay. There is a question about cost. Just asking if you used personal funds or did the Nebraska Housing Trust Fund cover your renovation costs? If you'd like to address that now or maybe later on.
Maybe I'll address that at the end if I can, just after I've gone
Okay.
through them all, if that's okay.
Yep, that sounds great.
So when you take these apart, it's kind of interesting. In Madison was the best. So like as you take them apart and you get to these old beams, you know, the old timers that put this stuff together, they were proud of what they did. And you find stuff like this where it's, you know, this guy signed it, you know, when he put the metal up, and it was June 24th of 1925. And I think when we found this, it was June 30th of whatever year that was. And so it was kind of a neat deal. We tried to kind of salvage this where we could keep the history of it. And then at the end, this is one of my favorites. This is apartment number 6, one of our top corner units, but they all have similar finishes, and you know, we design it with, you know, central air, central heat, soundproof insulation. You know, we try to kind of build it like a new house where it's very, very efficient, so to speak. So again, in this unit or this building, we have 12 units. The only way we advertise is Facebook Marketplace, and we have our website, but we don't do any other advertisements, and they're always full. And if we put a new ad up for an apartment, I mean, I would say 50 to 70 different families are communicating back and forth. So it's been good. Toward the end of that one, we jumped over to Madison 2, I call it. So about a block down the street, we bought another building. It was the old Tilden Bank building, smaller building, just a few apartments and a large storefront on the bottom, which is now State Farm Insurance. This building was in much better condition. The roof was nice. The outside was nice. Just Tilden Bank was selling. to another bank, and so they didn't need the building. But we turned this one into several apartments that is just a block down the street. This one was not grant funded. And they look like this. So then, and most of these buildings, when we start them, the planning process is probably a year. So, the next building, and I think we were kind of midstream on this building the last time that I was able to visit with you guys. I'm not sure if we were mid demo or end of demo, or I don't remember the exact location we were. But this is another grant funded, trust fund funded project. We had a year into planning this. So I was planning this about halfway through that Madison property. So we were building Madison while I was going to meetings and doing all the planning on this and getting the TIF and the trust fund and the whole thing. And so somewhere in the middle of that, we got the grant on that toward the end of Madison and moved over and started doing this project. But this building is pretty proud of this building. It's called the Grand Theater in Norfolk, Nebraska. It's about 100 years old, 1924. It had been vacant for 15 years. Used to be the old movie theater. I remember in 2001 was the last movie I went there. I think it was 101 Dalmatians. But it had sat vacant, and a theater group in Norfolk had tried to raise funds to turn it into a kind of the original theater, and unfortunately just weren't able to raise the funds. So, but we took it over just like it is. These are all the original chairs that are being taken out of the theater. This is the stage right after we got most of the chairs out, but this is kind of what we started with. And one of the biggest hurdles on this project, or one hurdle, was when you think of a theater, the floor goes like this, right? So the goal with this building was to take it down to nothing, just like the other one, put a second floor on it, have apartments upstairs, so nine condos, 9 apartments upstairs, and then have about 8,000 square feet of commercial space for downtown Norfolk. And so that floor added a level of complexity, but again, just kind of some of the before pictures, what we started with. This was the stage area. Return of the Jedi, I think, was the last play they had there. This wall's kind of interesting to me just because all these holes and stuff were covered, and just since 1924, and then I think in the 40s and then 1965, they'd had different renovations, and when they redid them, they didn't cover they didn't take time to redo the brick. They just kind of covered the holes and kept moving. So it's then when you're going to redo it into something that needs to be there for the next 100 years, then you got to go fix all that stuff. So, but it's just kind of interesting that these holes were probably cut in different periods of the last 100 years. And then the guys here, what they're doing is they're basically taking everything down to nothing. And with these old buildings, you got to worry about things like asbestos and lead paint and that kind of stuff. And so, we have different contractors that are licensed to do those things. And so it's, being methodical about taking it down in the way it needs to be taken down. Again, the theater, and things that aren't expected. So these huge, these beams right here, there's a lean-to on top of the stage that goes up about 40 feet that wasn't structural, that we had to take down piece by piece. And these beams go all the way to the ceiling and hold the entire ceiling up. So after taking this down where we could actually see what was there, we had to re-engineer the entire supporting structure up here and have custom metal beams made so that we could span the space and open it up and take those beams out without the roof falling over. So this is that lean-to. So one of the hurdles was finding a contractor that had enough cojones to where he would get up there and actually take that thing apart piece by piece without all these walls caving in. And so the amount of work that went into just bracing the walls and the structural part of it so that they could take this down while it swayed side to side as they cut it apart piece by piece. That was an interesting thing to watch, just for safety. And here's where we got everything opened up down to the original concrete floor. And then this is kind of a neat picture. So this, where I said that, this is the floor slope down. So, the one trick is we had to get everything on one plane. So as you come in the front door, everything is flat. So all the footings and the support structure had to come up this high to be on one. So a lot of the footings in the back are like 6 or 7 feet high, but that's how much fill had to go in there to make it on one plane. That's after they're done. And then these are the footings for the second floor. And then once that's done, it was kind of like a connector set where they put the supporting metal framing up and the metal trusses. And then that would be the bottom. It's about 10.5 foot, 11-foot floors on the bottom. So, and on the bottom floor now we have Juice Stop built out and they're moving there. They have a drive-through area downtown Norfolk. And then right now we're, as we speak, they're building out. They have 4,200 square feet we're building out for the Liberty Center, where they help disabled adults in Norfolk, and then about 1,800 square feet for McClory Engineering downtown. So you'll have a bunch of jobs down there. And then now starting to build off the second floor. And you can't, hopefully you can kind of see these. So they have these huge, beautiful beams. I refer to them as like railroad beams that went across the building from one end to the other. We initially were going to have the ceiling go way up here where it was 11 or 12 feet where the whole beam was exposed. It's just the cost to do that and the infrastructure to do that was just unfortunately cost prohibitive. But what we were able to do is we were able to kind of do kind of a modified version of that. So these are the bottom of the beams. These are the 100-year-old beams. We found a company to come in and sandblast them and clean up the metal, take all the rust off of them and coat them so that those run through the apartments. And then this was the back side of that. Once they added the back side on. And then again, another fun thing to do is this is that big beam that runs through the back of that area that we had to demo. And these are the big 2-story, 3-bedroom apartments. We had to cut that beam out, but we had to brace it all the way to the floor. So if it collapsed, it didn't take the building down. And it's so heavy, the guys have to take a welder up there, cut a foot off at a time and carry it down a ladder. And then that's after once they got that back end built. Drywall. Kind of the hallways, all the beams. Kind of how the beams look going through the apartments. This is kind of the entryway. That's what people see when they come into the apartments. And a more of a modern feel. Then you got the chandelier up here, which I'll show you in a second. And then each of these buildings now, and again, I've gotten better at documentation. I make these little glass pictures. And so, people that are coming through the building that think the building is kind of neat, I want them to be able to see what the building was and kind of the progression. So I have this in Madison too, as they come up. That way they can see what the building used to be and what it is now, just a kind of a quick visual. And then that chandelier is kind of a funny story where I ordered it, not realizing it was actually about 1,500 individual glass pieces that had to be put on there by hand. And so this is my contractor, Jake, swearing at me as he spent his third day putting that chandelier up. That'd be kind of what our kitchens look like there. And these are my favorite units. These and that front one with all the windows, but this is one of our two-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath condos. That's my 6-year-old getting ready for the open house. And then that's our family. And then last I would show you guys, so, and we don't do a lot of houses. This is a house we're actually drywalling here next week. Kind of a funny and an interesting story. I grew up as a child across the street from this house. And next door on your right, which would be east, there's a lady that lives in that other house. Her name is Nancy Reynolds, and she's 93 years old. She's lived in that house 50 years. She's lived there so long, she remembers it very vividly about me coming home as a baby and all the stuff the stuff I did terrorizing the neighborhood. So this house was owned by a guy that that we were always really fond of as a kid, and he passed away. Well, when Tom passed away, Nancy and Joe bought the house because they were scared about having a neighbor. And for 7 years, they just stored stuff in the house and didn't use it. It was just a storage facility for them. So one day she walked in my office and I didn't remember her, and she reintroduced herself and just said, this is the last house in the neighborhood that hasn't been renovated. If you'll renovate it like you did with the theater building downtown, I'll give it to you for $1. So, it's across from my childhood home. It's about 6 blocks from where I work every day. In our planning firm, we kind of took that on, and so we gutted it to scratch, just like we do on all the stuff. This is the side of the house. Very beautiful, but very troubled house. And when they moved out, they had so much stuff in there. They took about 5 boxes, and she said, "You know what? We haven't looked at that stuff in 5 years. Whatever's in there, you can have it." So that was part of it, is just finding a home for all this stuff. This is some of the stuff after we got rid of the other part of it. She had about 6,000 Life magazines, and this is actually a pretty valuable, pretty coveted Life magazine. It's one of the more famous ones. So we went through there and probably found 15 or 20 pretty neat ones. You got the first day of Disneyland, and you got the Beatles, and all the way back through history. And we own the Hardington Hotel, which is an old hotel in Hardington. We took some of these and put them throughout the units. Again, just took everything down to nothing. Yeah, it's more scary when you look at it. One thing they found that was kind of cool is the guys were taking the walls apart, and this penny popped out. It's an 1893 penny. But here's where it's all opened up, and the guys are getting ready to put in the header beams. That's what it looks like now. When we took it up, they had such high ceilings in there. So I love high ceilings. I love vaulted ceilings, kind of like we did in Madison and like we did in a lot of the theater. So we used those, and we made vaulted ceilings in most of the upstairs living room and the upstairs ceilings in the bedrooms. And then that's the kind of the big wraparound deck that we redid. Yeah, to answer the question on funding, so our building in Pierce that we did, the 2 buildings in Tilden were 100% our money. We didn't have any help for funding. The building in Madison, we got a small amount of TIF money, and then we also did get the Nebraska Housing Trust Fund grant. And that building is I think it'd be a good advertising piece for that grant, because without that grant, there's no way I think a private person would ever put the amount of money that needed to go into that infrastructure to save that building. So without that grant, that would have been a pretty tough building. Madison 2, the one down the street, that was 100% us, private funding. The theater building, we got the Housing Trust Fund grant, which again helped with the infrastructure and the demo. And then this house and the other stuff is private funding. So it's kind of a mixture. Things we look for, and I'm kind of blessed right now. I have those 2 guys. That's kind of been my secret formula. If there is one, is if I can get 1 or 2 guys that are really good, that can figure out the hard things, like, hey, how do we redo this ceiling, and how do we structurally brace this building, and the things that are tough, and then a few guys that are kind of in and out. I have that right now. So as long as I have those guys, we'll basically run as hard as we can, as long as they like me. Which hopefully will be a while. But what we're looking for is, ideally when we're looking at these buildings, we want the building to be structurally sound. You know, probably not like that one big Madison building was, but more like that Madison 2 building or the theater. You know, we're also very, because of a couple experiences we had, we're very sensitive to the government climate, to the city council, to what, you know, what's the sentiment with the city to growth, and do they want growth in these kind of buildings, and are they friendly to developers? You know, we just don't want a lot of headaches. You know, there's enough headaches with this stuff as there is. You know, we just not that everything will be easy, but we want a city to be appreciative of somebody coming in and helping. And you know, are there sources needed to fund these projects, and then, you know, what's available. So those are kind of the main things. And then, you know, the grant is nice, you know, pros and cons on the grant. You know, the funding helps to alleviate some of the stress off the cost of building these, and the cost has definitely gone up substantially. You know, drawbacks would be is, you know, the amount of income stuff that's needed is pretty tedious. You know, your vacancy rate will go up because it takes longer to find people that are willing to give all the stuff and to get everything approved. It's just one more layer of stuff, but we've had a good experience with it. Trying to think of anything I didn't cover that I should cover, Lori. Ooh, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay. I have lost my Zoom for some reason, but let me see. I did see a question before I lost my screen. Rick wanted to know how far you might go for a good project.
It depends, and that might be a better question for Jacob, my contractor.
Okay.
That's the hard thing is that's the hardest thing is finding contractors that are, you know, number one, they have the aptitude to be able to do a project like this. You know, number two, they stay with you. And I think that's probably one of the biggest risks, to be really honest, is if you start a project like the theater building, which is going to take a year of planning. And, you know, that one probably took 15 to 18 months of build out. Madison was probably closer to 18 plus months. You know, if you start with a contractor like that and you have a good relationship, and for some reason or another, it either doesn't work out or they decide to do something else, which happens, you know, then you got to start midstream with somebody else. So it's keeping the band together, so to speak, is I guess probably one of the toughest things, but yeah, open to ideas.
Okay. Rick followed up on his question. I have my Zoom back now. An old school in Milligan would like to see, the community would like to see that property turned into housing. I'm not sure where Milligan is, but just wondering if you might travel or if you're staying in Northeast Nebraska. So.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where Milligan is either. We probably, and there's we're kind of blessed where, you know, it used to be hard to find projects, and I would drive up and down, you know, town and look for projects. And now I think with some of the stuff we've done, they just kind of seem to find us faster than we have time to do them, which is good, but probably wouldn't travel too terribly far.
Yeah, one thing I learned maybe for the first time, and maybe I knew it before, was just you basically go down to the shell of the building and just restructure.
Yeah, and I think the first thing to do is just evaluate what's good and what's bad. And so I think sometimes people try to put a Band-Aid on something that's, you know, that's inherently bad. And so you have to go down far enough to see any damage to the structure. And if it needs to be repaired, repair it. So otherwise what you could do is you could build a bunch of nice, beautiful stuff upstairs. And if the structure is not good and it starts to sag, it ruins the whole ship.
Yeah.
So it's a blend.
Okay. Rick says that Milligan is in Fillmore County, east of Geneva. So thanks for that, Rick. So what other questions do you have for Ben as we open it up for a time of Q&A, or even thoughts and comments about his projects, what he's doing, what you would like to know more about? I know he's been a mentor to several people from our last time that he spoke on HomeNE. So what questions do you have for him?
Ben, this is Sharon Heffley. Thank you so much for what you're doing, number one, your willingness to share, number two,
And number three, your mentorship. We have had people call you and they are so appreciative, and so are we as they're trying to walk through these. I would be real interested, as we're always working to revitalize our rural communities, get more housing in there. It's just not practical always to go build new houses or whatever, and that doesn't really strike all of the people looking for housing. So these are important projects. What are your, I don't know, top 3, 5, whatever? What would you say to somebody before they embark on something like this?
I think it would just be understanding what you want. You know, for me, I know, and kind of the reason I got into it initially is again, my background is financial planning, and so I always understood the value of building income streams as a developer. So that's always everything I've done has been, you know, each building in itself may or may not be a huge deal, but then together, you know, the income streams are important. So, you know, for me, my number one goal is, hey, I want to build housing because I understand the need, and I understand not a lot of people are doing it, as many people that should be doing it anyway. And I understood the value of the financial piece and the income stream. So that was my number one thing, right? I knew what I wanted to do. And then I evaluated my options. I evaluated, okay, I can stick build it and this is what it costs. And okay, I can't, that doesn't make sense. And, you know, or I can go to this building and build this out, and I could run the numbers, and that made more sense. So that's kind of my elimination. And then, number 3, how do I do it? Right. And so just a lot of research and calls, and, figured out about the grant and found the contractors. And so for me, it was just a sheer want to figure it out. It was one of those deals where at one point in time, I raised my hand and I said, I have no idea how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. But as people are looking at this stuff, and I appreciate your comment, Sharon. I'm more than happy to, I'll tell them my opinion, whether, good, bad, or indifferent, but, they're welcome to bounce stuff off of me, and I wouldn't definitely consider myself an expert now, but I'm farther than I was yesterday, I guess.
Do you have any idea what your square foot cost is? I mean, I'm sure it's different, but just an average of the second story, the commercial buildings that you've done with housing and commercial, whatever. Do you have any idea what that square foot price is when you're all done?
I could probably, to be honest, I look at it more from a cash flow standpoint than a square foot price standpoint. Though I understand the two are correlated. At the theater, I can tell you here, probably pretty close. I probably had about $1 million, and this would include the grant money, right? So this isn't all my money.
Right.
I
Right.
probably
Total, what it would take, no matter who's paying or what.
Yeah. So I probably had $1.5 million into that one. And upstairs, if I figure how many square feet there are, with the second floor on those 3 bedrooms, I probably have 10,000 square feet. But the part of the value on that one was then I also had 8,000 square feet ready to build the bottom floor. And because the infrastructure is done, I could build it for half price. So now I'm building that stuff out for about 65 or $70 a foot. Madison was cheaper because I had my guy, rather than the bigger company, I had my guy, that one I probably had, honestly, probably $135 a foot, even with demo and everything. Which is low. Most people couldn't, and I don't know if I could replicate that.
Well, I very, very specific reason. I was working yesterday on the cash flow, and then I paused to see what the projected cost per square foot was, and about fell off my chair. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason I'm struggling with the cash flow on this project. And
I tell you, you have to be, there's so many different relationships with contractors, and I'm probably not the guy to tell you what's good or bad. And it probably, the relationship you need to build with those guys is probably dictated by your knowledge level and how much you want to get into it. If you got a guy that knows nothing about construction and he doesn't want to put any time into it, he needs to hire a big company that can do it all, and the cost is going to be different.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't know it all, but I was willing to learn it, and I took half of that role or more on to alleviate some of the costs. So it just kind of depends on who your developer is and what their experience level is. And I could see just to be honest, I could see somebody getting in with one of these projects and maybe either not wanting to put the amount of time in, or not having the relationship right, or not having the numbers right, and not being able to finish it if they don't have enough money. So that's a risk too.
What's been the biggest surprise expense? I mean, you've mentioned you ran into this and then we had to have the structural engineer. So I'm wondering what has been, and maybe it's different for each project, the thing that you get in there and it wasn't in your projections, it wasn't in your estimates.
Each project would have its own, right? So it's I can make you a list for each project, but as an example, like the Madison project, some of the big expenses are like that beam, right? It wasn't just taking out that big beam, it was re-engineering the ceiling and then getting into the roof trusses. And so it was, 3 guys for probably a month of time re-engineering all that stuff, by themselves, and all the material and the labor that it took to, say, hey, boom, there's $20,000, right? Which to me is a lot of money. Or hey, we had the stairs designed this way and the inspector came through and he says the rise is half an inch goofy this way, we need to take the stairs, hey, there's, $3,000. So I would say each of them, if especially a building of that scale, you're going to have 20 of those things. So you just have to, your contingency number has to be bigger than if you're stick building.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Catherine asked how you determine your rent, Ben. Is it by square footage or the quality of the fixtures that you've put into the properties? How do you go about setting your rent price?
Yeah. And each community is different. So initially, and I use Facebook Marketplace or the different exchanges in the Norfolk and Madison, to be Madison County Exchange probably exclusively. I know all the projects around and the properties, and I know what the rent is going for. And so we usually kind of, our strategy has always been to go about 10 or 15% under market, just because we have zero vacancy. But then you can also, for me, over time, now that we have a bunch of these in different communities, you can tell, because if I list an apartment and if I have 70 families that want it, it's probably too cheap. And if I list it again and I list it higher and I only have 4 families, then it's probably too expensive. So, I kind of can range, and I can kind of tell what the market is based on what my response rate is from my listings.
Okay.
But we try to be really fair, in saying that rental, the cost of the building and rental prices have gone up. So we're slowly raising them. The theater building here, the 1 bedrooms rent for like $950. The 2 bedrooms are like $1,150, and the 3 bedrooms are $1,300.
Okay. That was a question I had for you, so thanks for touching on that.
Yeah.
What other questions are there for Ben while you're thinking of your question? What lessons have you learned, Ben? And maybe you've touched on some of those, but somebody who's thinking of getting into this type of work, what lessons would you share with them today? Maybe 2 or 3 lessons learned.
Yeah, a lesson I've learned, I think, in everything, whether it's this or the car wash stuff or the financial planning realm, is, I've always been really good about asking questions to people that are doing a better job than I am. And so, with this, I wasn't hesitant about calling people that had more knowledge than I did to ask them, how would you do this? I know I met with, Connie, I talked to Connie Geary a couple of times in Norfolk because I've renovated a ton of buildings like this. And, one thing we had in Norfolk that was a little bit different is we had such a valuable commercial space on the bottom, and we had to do a lot of thought about what infrastructure do we put in that goes to the roof or in general to make sure we can build the bottom out where it makes sense. So bringing people in that knew more than I did. The other thing would probably be, just like life and everything, there's levels to this, right? So you're probably not wanting to start tomorrow and jump into that Madison building. You start with a smaller building where it's more feasible, and you work your way up the ladder, which helps you build that Rolodex, which gives you knowledge, where you know what you're actually doing. And then you do a few of those, and then you jump into something bigger, and then you do a couple of those. And, now we're doing that house, and it seems great because it's kind of a breeze. It's not so tedious. But it's, you have to work your way up the ladder, to kind of build the knowledge.
I had to smile when you said the 93-year-old neighbor came in and told you she'd sell it to you for $1. I thought of my mother-in-law. They can get feisty sometimes. So
yeah. And she walked through yesterday. She hadn't been through since we started, and it was such a neat thing because she pretty much kind of started crying. She was just so happy. But she made the comment. She goes, "God, when something happens to me, can my kids call you and give you our house so you can do the same thing with our house?"
oh,
But just such a neat lady.
Oh, how cool. That's a great success story just in itself. So, yeah. So, final call for questions for Ben. Well, hearing or seeing none, Ben, I just want to say thank you once again for presenting today. You did share your website. Is your contact information on the website?
Yep. If you just on the website up at the top, it's just under the contact screen.
Okay, perfect. So, as people have questions, feel free to reach out to Ben and pick his brain and see what he can offer you as you maybe begin to start renovating your own communities or some private property that you have. So greatly appreciate it. As we begin to conclude, I just want to make you aware that Ben's presentation will be on our website, which is HomeNE.us. You can find his presentation there as well as some of our past webinars are featured there, but you can find all of the webinars on HomeNE.us. And so tap into those. Go back and visit Ben's from February of 2022 when he presented with Department of Economic Development personnel as well and see how far he's come in his project. So also just want to make you aware of next month's presentation. We'll be joined on September 19th by Megan Helberg. She was the Nebraska 2020 Teacher of the Year. And she just recently changed jobs, but when I contacted her, she was with Loop County Public Schools as a teacher there. And so she's going to be joining us to talk about youth and community engagement. And I think that will be a fascinating topic for the HomeNE webinar series. So again, Ben, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation. I can feel the wheels turning maybe in the group about maybe upcoming projects in various communities. So with that,
Appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
yeah, with that, any last questions, comments? Well, if not, have a great